You're not going to be a dictator, are you? I said, no, 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 other than day one.
Donald Trump has successfully moved the Overton window in a way that is as dangerous for the future of democracy in this country as anything else.
This is what Vout and Project 2025 wanted.
He's daring Tom Homan to come and arrest him. Should he do it? I would do it if I were Tom. I think it's great.
They control the Congress, they control the White House, and they control the courts. And so, of course, they're massively overreaching. And yes, they are getting away with it right now.
This is clearly a man who cannot tolerate criticism of him or what he does, which is exactly what authoritarianism is all about.
The New York Times is just as fake as CNN and MSDNC. They really are the enemy of the people.
What he is saying, rather bluntly, if you stand up to Donald Trump, he will punish you.
Protesters in Philadelphia, state capitals in California, Minnesota, Michigan, Texas, Wisconsin, Indiana, and others showed up to oppose Trump, Musk, and Project 2025.
The US and President Trump has overseen America's largest military parade in decades as nationwide protests take place against his leadership.
Demonstrations are happening right across the United States today to oppose the Trump administration.
Two visions of America. On a day the country's deepening divide was there for all the world to see.
Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the show. Logically Left. I'm here, Jeff Waldorf, here Monday. We've got a lot of stuff here. We got a big show today. We're going to talk about a lot of different things here, including the Trump drinking the haterade. Not a surprise here, but I'm going to talk about that. The eulogy that happened over the weekend that was insane. We've got Republicans in Oklahoma saying, you know what we should do? We should, use taxpayer money and tuition money from students to build Charlie Kirk memorials. Yeah, we've got that. We've got the DOJ dropping an investigation into Tom Homan for trying to grab that bag, literal bag of money. Insane, more insane stories of corruption here. We have CEOs that are admitting behind closed doors, Trump bad for business. Well, I could have told him that. Oh, yeah, I did, actually. Bad for business, bad for democracy, bad for pretty much everyone who is not a straight white Republican male. And then Ilhan Omar basically hits the nail on the head in an interview saying we are basically being run by idiots. I love that. And we're going to talk about that and why she said that. What was she reacting to? So, big news day, as usual. So, why don't we get into this flaming dumpster fire we call the news? Oh boy. And we'll start out with Charlie Kirk and the memorial. Oh boy. If you haven't already, please like and share the stream. Very important that you do so. With that, now let's go. Over the weekend, mourners paid tribute to right-wing podcaster Charlie Kirk, who was shot and killed by a radical, politically non-affiliated young man from a gun-loving MAGA family in Utah. Kind of weird, the details surrounding that, but that's what we know so far, okay? But what else was pretty weird from that day was President Donald Trump turning his eulogy into basically a Trump rally. Because, I suppose we should have expected that. I mean, honestly. And another thing that we should have also probably expected was Donald Trump's very unchristian-like behavior and I'm referring to specifically foregoing forgiveness to his enemies.
He did not hate his opponents. He wanted the best for them. That's where I disagreed with Charlie. I hate my opponent. And I don't want the best for them. I'm sorry. I am sorry, Erica. But now Erica can talk to me and the whole group, and maybe they can convince me that that's not right, but I can't stand my opponent.
Well then, that would appear to be your honesty. Look, Donald Trump lies about a lot of things. A lot of things. Ridiculous things. Crowd sizes. But I tell you what, he ain't lying there. He really, really does hate his political opponents. Okay? And here's the thing about that. Christianity, and again, Trump claims to be the biggest Christian, the best Christian of all time, the greatest Christian of all time, the most Christian-like Christian that is ever Christian. Okay? That book, that religion, it does technically teach you to love your enemy. Love thy enemy. Yeah. So there you go. But anyway, Trump used this time eulogizing, or supposed to be eulogizing, Charlie Kirk, to then push political goals. For example, he made an announcement that he planned, or he talked about an announcement that he planned to make on Monday about the causes of autism. Oh boy! Oh boy! Now, I had read about this. I don't know. I haven't seen that announcement yet, what they were going to talk about, but there was a preview to try to link Tylenol, taking Tylenol, to the development of autism, and they're pushing something else. One of those, I forget the name of it. It's some sort of quack cure, obviously, that just happens to be produced by a company owned by Dr. Oz. Shocker. Shocker. Now, in another instance, by the way, he also talked about how Charlie Kirk, getting back to him, was from the suburbs of Chicago. Oh. And described his backing for plans to allegedly address crime in that city. In fact, he said one of the last things he said to me, sir, is please, sir, save Chicago. We're going to do that. We're going to save Chicago from horrible crime. Look, I think it's pretty telling that someone from the suburbs of Chicago is telling another person, a very, very rich person, that, who claims to be an expert on inner city crime. I mean, I know crime. I know the greatest crime, the best crime. I know crime. Let me tell you what. Crime. I know it. I live it. I mean, I know, I live it and know how to fight it. Yeah, that's it. Right. That's the ticket. That's the ticket. Look, yeah, all these people, by the way, claim to be experts on crime and had either lived in the rich areas in town where there isn't a lot of crime. Well, okay, let me amend that a little bit. There is a lot of crime in the rich areas, except a lot of that crime tends to be legal because wage theft, perpetuated by many CEOs, business owners, etc. Yeah, these people, that kind of crime by these people is the leading type of crime in this country. Billions and billions of dollars every year stolen from the American worker through wage theft. So I'm just saying, but that, nobody goes after that. No, we're not going after that at all as a country. No, because it is the CEOs and the people that are perpetuating this crime that are in charge. And Trump, of course, had some other crime in his history. Very, very recent history. But people tend to gloss over and forget about that whole thing. But anyway, yeah, they're experts. They're experts on crime. They're gonna save this country. They're gonna save Chicago from all that crime. And here's the thing about that: crime is real, but the cause of it is mainly socioeconomic. That's it. I mean, you solve those issues, you could bring down the crime rate. You don't have to do it with an army of police officers. You can do it with good policy that actually helps people in their material conditions. Okay? But that they don't want to bring down the crime rate. They just want to send the military into places, into the cities specifically to crack down on people who live there. Black people, mainly. Let's be honest. Now, Trump also went on to attack the left while touting his political investigations into liberal organizations. He said the Department of Justice is investigating the networks of radical left maniacs who fund, organize, fuel, and perpetrate political violence. And we think we know who many of them are. No, you don't. They just have a list of people that he doesn't like. Okay. But he said law enforcement can only be the beginning of our response to Charlie's murder. So here's the thing about that. There's absolutely no evidence of any links between Charlie Kirk's murder and left-wing groups or even left-wing ideology. He didn't have a coherent ideology. Like, surprise, many mass shooters don't really have a coherent political ideology. The stuff he carved into his bullets, the sayings, they were mostly gaming memes from like Helldivers 2 and like a furry subforum or something like that. There weren't any donations, by the way, to Donald Trump either. Okay, he wasn't a member of the Democratic Socialists of America. And look, I was even wrong when I thought that he could be a member of the far right incel groypers. Okay, and so as far as we can tell, as far as we know, the 22-year-old alleged to have shot and killed Charlie Kirk was an unaffiliated, inactive voter and not really a member of either side. Weird. But yet, so Trump and some of the far right are still using this as an example of leftist political violence, which, by the way, does happen, but it's extremely rare. Extremely rare. In reality, researchers have found that right-wing extremist violence has actually been more frequent and more lethal than left-wing violence. Yeah. It's according to University of Dayton sociologist Art Gibson, but backed up by pretty much every single study that has looked into politically motivated violence. They've found all the same things. Okay? In the United States, right-wing violence is just more prevalent. It's more prevalent than political violence, from the left. Way, way, way more prevalent. Okay? Responsible for far more political violence than the left is. The right is. Okay? The right is far more responsible. And of course, it's anti-government, anti-LGBTQ, and anti-abortion views that feed into that violence. Those are the top reasons the right wing uses political violence. And I'm not saying the entire right wing is violent. Not like what the right wing is saying about the left in claiming, oh, they're all violent. No. But there are more instances of far more instances of right-wing violence using those criteria, right? Those kinds of beliefs, the anti-government, anti-abortion beliefs, lead to more violence. That's it. And look, it's not a surprise to me that Donald Trump is fomenting more political violence and is using the situation, the murder of Charlie Kirk, to come after the left, his political opponents. I think he's trying to turn Charlie Kirk into a Horst Wessel, right? Horst Wessel, by the way, was a German Nazi who happened to have been murdered by communists. Now, here's the thing. Apparently, Horst Wessel didn't pay his rent in his apartment. And so the landlady hired two people that happened to be communists to come and force him out, to evict him. And that ended up with the death of Horst Wessel. Okay? Now, what happened? Nazis ended up calling him a martyr for their cause somehow and use him as a rallying point, again, because he had created, I believe, the Nazi anthem. And so he was used as a rallying point and was used as an excuse to come after the left and to excise them from political life. Look, it was remarked, by the way, by members of the Nazi party that Horst Wessel was actually way more useful to their goals of taking over and creating an ethno-state in Germany He was more valuable to that movement dead than he ever was when he was alive. And that's why I believe that some on the right, the far right, are using Charlie Kirk, calling him a martyr. Okay? They've wasted absolutely no time in using Charlie Kirk's assassination, which was a bad thing, by the way. Nobody here, I mean, there have been consistent denunciations by people in the Democratic Party, for example, over this, and of political violence in general. All right, doesn't matter to them because they're still using that assassination as a way to go after the people that Donald Trump, that are his political opponents. That's the reality. Don't forget the Oklahoma City bomber. Oh, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. All right. Let's move on. More insanity. Of course. Of course. An Oklahoma Republican wants to force public universities in his state to build statues commemorating right-wing podcaster Charlie Kirk. Oklahoma State Senator Shane Jett, who leads the Oklahoma Freedom Caucus, kind of ironic here, wants to force the state to honor Kirk by establishing Charlie Kirk memorial plazas that would be built in highly visible and easily accessible locations at public campuses. Now, here's the thing about this. These are not optional. Not optional at all. The bill states that each institution of higher education within the Oklahoma state system of higher education is required to have such a plaza completed by March of 2028. That's right. Legislation also calls for signs commemorating Charlie Kirk's courage and faith and explaining his role as a voice of a generation, modern civil rights hero. Leader. Vocal Christian and martyr for truth and faith and free speech advocate. What? Civil rights leader. Okay, he once called the civil rights a mistake, but somehow he's a civil rights leader. Right. Okay. Sure. I mean, oh, and by the way, martyr for truth and faith. Really? That's pretty dangerous. Okay, but anyway, there's more. Other pieces of legislation filed by Jett include a bill that looks to designate Kirk's birthday of October 14th as Charlie Kirk Free Speech Day, and a resolution that would require the state legislature to recognize and honor him. Wow. So they want to force colleges into creating statues of Charlie Kirk, who only went to those colleges, by the way, to own the libs in debates on camera. Okay, that's seems like a bit of a waste of money for me. And here's the thing: if a private individual wants to fund these, on his own dime, all right, fine, or and put them on his own property, of course, private property. Go ahead. I don't care. I don't really care. But this is forcing taxpayers and students, okay, who fund colleges through their tuition, to create memorials for a person who actually kind of hated college. Yeah, he hated public universities and education, okay? It's probably one of the most ridiculous ideas I have ever seen. Come on. Are you serious? And of course, the answer to that is yes, they're absolutely serious. It's so bizarre. It's bizarre. I mean, here's the thing. Florida wants to do a similar thing, right? But they're not actually, to give weird credit to the state of Florida, they're not trying to force students and taxpayers into funding memorials for Charlie Kirk. They're actually planning a privately funded statue of Kirk, which I don't care about. Whatever. Go ahead and waste your money. Just don't waste our money or the students' money. That's supposed to be paying for their education, not for statues of a dead podcaster. Okay? Look, there's a reason that Oklahoma ranks 50th in education. Okay? And it's a good example of why. It's a good example of why. Okay? Instead of fixing their dismal, pathetic education system, they're focusing on creating shrines to dead right-wing podcasters. Okay? I thought Christianity is supposed to be against, this kind of blatant idolatry. Aren't there supposed to be, biblical verses against this whole entire thing? Again, if you want to hold this man aloft as some sort of amazing free speech advocate or whatever, go ahead. Just do it on your dime. I don't agree with you. I don't agree with you on your lauding of Charlie Kirk, okay? And I didn't agree with him on a lot of things. In fact, almost everything, all right? But here's the thing. I think we've got bigger things wrong in this country, bigger problems in this country than our opinions about dead podcasters, okay? Making this a legislative priority in a state that has clearly failed when it comes to their own education is just absolutely stupid and ridiculous. My God, man. Did he speak different to different audiences? That is a great question, Happy Honey 41. And actually, he did. He did. There's a lot of videos, apparently, of Charlie Kirk saying reasonable things and also, quoting Bible verses. And then, of course, there are other videos, the videos that we are all familiar with, of him saying some of the most heinous things. And so, yeah, he did have that, say different things to different audiences. And that's why there's such a differing opinion of Charlie Kirk. So that is very strange. Epstein, absolutely. Let's not forget about releasing the Epstein files. They ought to do so, but of course Republicans don't want to. Weird how that works. Very, very, very strange stuff there. Except not really. All right. Confederate statues weren't enough. They want to expand their symbolic hatred to the modern age. Indeed. Okay. Moving on. An investigation into Donald Trump's now border czar, Tom Homan, was dropped by the Trump Department of Justice. You see, in September of last year, Tom Homan was allegedly recorded, accepting a bag of money filled with about $50,000 in cash by undercover FBI agents posing as businessmen after agreeing to help them secure government contracts in a prospective second Trump administration. That's right. The September 2024 payment arose from a probe that was not targeting Homan at first, okay? But, here's the thing. The guy took, allegedly, a bag of cash in return for contracts, okay, for border security if Donald Trump won. That would be clear bribery. Yeah. Clear and obvious bribery. Now, investigators began looking into Homan after the original target of a case suggested that a payment to Homan could lead to federal border security contracts. Now, the DOJ, of course, shut that whole thing down after Trump began his second term. He appointed Homan, and there you go. Now he's running immigration. So, yeah. They said that we had doubts that prosecutors could actually prove that Tom Homan had actually agreed to a specific act in exchange for that bag of cash, because he was not in a government position, and because he was not in a government position at the time. So, wait, but he was expected to be picked. He had served in the first Trump administration, and it's very likely everybody knew that he was going to be picked to resume that position if Trump won a second term. And so the FBI was apparently, they were convinced enough to be like, hey, let's do this sting operation. Let's see if he takes his cash, in return for promises for border contracts. And he took it. He took the money. And so, yes, that is corruption. That is criminal. That was them trying to curry favor with him. And yet, not illegal. Not corruption? No, we don't have any evidence. We're not going to look into it. Oh, come on. It is so comical that these days, such open and brazen corruption is ignored. Just ignored. And look how cheap, by the way, these officials go for. $50,000 in a paper bag? That's it? Wow. And by the way, this is for contracts that are potentially worth millions, if not billions of dollars. I mean, in 2024, the government spent nearly $10 billion on ICE. Okay? And I don't mean to put in your drinks, immigration. Okay? And now, thanks to Trump's big, beautiful bill, we're going to spend a hell of a lot more. I mean, we got to pay for those, ICE agents and their bonuses and their student loan cancellation and all that, all the perks now to becoming basically a stormtrooper. All right. And that's really it. Look, FBI Director Kash Patel and Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche said this matter, which originated under the Biden administration, and that's another reason, of course, why they dropped it, because or one of the reasons they're going to, give to drop it is, Biden political prosecution, blah, blah, blah. He said that they're subject to a full review by officials with the FBI and DOJ who found no credible evidence of any criminal wrongdoing. Are you kidding? Really? Of course they wouldn't find any criminal wrongdoing because it's their guy. It's their dude. Come on. Seriously. The department's resources must remain focused on real threats to the American people, not baseless investigations. As a result, the investigation has been closed, they said in a statement on Saturday. Real threats, they say. Real threats. This administration has moved people off of the FBI to help with what? Deporting immigrants. That's really it. By the way, depriving these same immigrants of their right to due process. Many of them here legally, allowed to work here legally, allowed to be here in the United States legally, and still deported. Okay? Some of them even American citizens. But no, we can't, we're just going to pull people off the FBI into this. And not only that, but we are going to take the FBI, put about 1,000 of them into erasing Donald Trump's name from the Epstein files. And whoever's left is now going to be looking into left-wing political violence, which is vastly dwarfed by right-wing political violence in this country. It is not a shock what's going on here. That they will protect their corrupt friends from uncomfortable investigations into their alleged crimes. It's pretty clear that they will never, ever, ever hold their own accountable. Okay. So here is the long one. Oh boy. Fortune magazine claims that CEOs are getting rather tired of President Donald Trump's economic policies. Oh, really? Now, in a piece written by Jeffrey Sonnenfeld and Stephen Henriquez of the pro-business publication Fortune, the writers go into how Republican CEOs are already kind of fed up with Trump 2.0. Now, they were apparently at the Yale Chief Executive Leadership Institute's CEO Forum. Very fancy. Now, apparently they gathered top political leaders alongside Fortune 500 CEOs for a Chatham House rules discussion. Now, one of the only stipulations here is that direct quotes were strictly off the record. So, can't quote anybody. So, everybody's anonymous. And nobody, if they were asked about, hey, is this your quote? Kind of sounds like you, bro. They could have plausible deniability, but that does allow them to speak their minds. How convenient for them. And I'm going to talk about that later, but there is a lot here. They talked about a lot of things. Now, they write that senators from both sides and some Trump administration officials had to face down a near unanimous verdict from over 100 top business leaders representing some of the world's largest companies and most iconic brands that Trump's policies were just not working for him. Just ain't working. They write, business leaders at our forum worry that Trump is undermining an economic system that took decades to build and has long benefited the U.S. more than any other country under both Republican and Democratic administrations, all for short-term gains. Which short-term gains? Okay, we're not seeing any short-term gains here. Okay, we're just not. Now, they see what's happening is a hollowing out of U.S. economic foundations and institutions in this free-to-speak environment, a loaded topic these days, right? They said that while they approve of bringing manufacturing back to the U.S. and bolstering economic and national security, they fear for America's international standing amid the degradation of national security at the FBI, CIA, and the Pentagon. Among many other things, by the way. So here's the thing. Trump's an isolationist, mainly because he doesn't care about anyone but himself, okay? He has long looked to punish China, Japan, etc., other countries, and is now doing it with tariffs. Even though tariffs are not paid for by the other countries, they're actually paid for by American citizens. This is nothing more than a tax on working people, okay? And it's not very effective. They found that 2/3 of the CEOs surveyed at their event said tariffs have been harmful to their businesses. They estimate that 80% of them have been shared equally between domestic firms and U.S. consumers, and said that businesses have attempted to limit the cost of tariffs from being passed on to consumers by rerouting their supply chains, reworking operations, instituting hiring pauses, or administering large-scale layoffs. But they have limited options left, as inventories built up before the tariffs took effect continue to be depleted. As one CEO of a major U.S. manufacturing company explained to the group, if the U.S. government wants to help protect certain industries, they need to help those industries be successful. It is not just putting a bunch of tariffs in place and assuming those industries are going to get moved to the U.S. There have to be incentives. Consumers want products to be low cost. Power tools, hand tools, clothing, sneakers. Does it really make sense to be manufacturing all that in the United States? I do not believe it does. I believe there are certain industries where it does make sense, and he doesn't offer any examples here. But it is not realistic to expect every industry in the world to be manufacturing products in the U.S. for the U.S. Now, here's the thing. It actually kind of makes a little bit of sense that if you do want to encourage production in the United States, you have to do some incentives. Why? Why do I say that makes sense? Because, look, in the U.S., you have higher labor costs. Not because American workers are inherently worth more, it's because you have a higher standard of living in this country. And so, yes, labor happens to be one of the highest expenses that a business can, incur, right? And of course, you also want, in return for those higher labor costs, for the people to turn around and then spend money in the local economy, which actually helps the local economy, raises wages for everyone else. And so that's kind of how it's supposed to work. Now, the thing is, right now, people cannot afford high quality America-made products, okay? Wages have not kept up with inflation. They have not kept up with housing, food, and energy. The costs of those have massively increased, and that is without factoring in the tariffs, adding those, to that. And working people, we're in a world of hurt. Things are not good. Things are not good at all, okay? And we actually do have to address that. And tariffs right now, even though I do believe there is a role for tariffs for certain protectionist policy, doing it the way that Trump has been doing it, not smart. Very stupid. Okay. But now, the article, getting back to that, notes that the leaders of Gap, Ford, Stanley, Black & Decker, Nike, ConAgra, Procter & Gamble, Home Depot, Best Buy, Macy's, Target, and Walmart, yes, are just but a few of the many who have outlined their similar dilemmas in recent public commentary. They have talked a lot about this. About how, hey, tariffs not a good idea. Now, again, here's the thing. I don't think all tariffs or even the idea of tariffs are 100% a bad thing. And I would love to see some of the manufacturing jobs come back to the United States, given that they are high-paying union jobs. Okay, that's very important. High-paying union jobs. Okay? But that's not happening right now. That's not happening at all. In fact, fewer than half of all the CEOs actually had reported having increased investment in domestic manufacturing or other infrastructure since the Liberation Day tariffs. And even fewer said they expected the results of their capital investments to be material. A lot of it's stock buybacks, honestly. Trump's policies, though, have done nothing more than raise costs on working people. That's really it. One manufacturing CEO said that right now, the cost of tariffs still far exceeds any of the benefits provided by the Trump administration, which drew murmurs of agreement from across the room. In fact, nearly 3/4 of all executives that were surveyed said the courts were correct in ruling that all of Trump's tariffs are illegal as they have been implemented. And if the Supreme Court agrees with those business leaders, which I doubt they will, I think they'll agree with Donald Trump, but they said if they do agree, then it will create uncertainty in the markets, more uncertainty, and they said, well, that's not a good thing. Businesses love certainty, right? Now, there's another leader in the manufacturing sector who said this, quote, manufacturing has always been a big advantage for America, so I think bringing back manufacturing is important. I think a lot of these CEOs would be fine with that if there were low-paying jobs, and I think that's important. Whereas, I want to bring back manufacturing, yes, but I want to do it with high-paid union labor. Okay, that's really important. With benefits and everything. Okay, but he says this administration has it right. We need a level playing field in the United States. But I'm always worried about what the government is going to do next. It seems like the tariffs have simmered down, but in reality, where manufacturers import it from is Mexico, Canada, and China. None of those trade deals is settled. So if you want to make a change in your business, you recognize tariffs are going to change in 90 days or 120 days. And I don't want to look like a fool. So I'm going to hold back. Okay. And there it is. They're basically saying no investments, no growing the workforce. In fact, a lot of businesses are likely going to keep firing people or laying them off. This is why the most recent jobs reports have been an absolute disaster, and they're not going to get any better. Not anytime soon. But what about the interest rates? The interest rates were cut, right? Well, that's not going to really do a whole lot, okay? See, on pressuring the Federal Reserve, because this is a result of Trump pressuring Jerome Powell to cut those interest rates by 1/4 of a point. In fact, more than 3/4 of these CEOs say that Trump is not acting in America's best interest by doing what he did to pressure the Federal Reserve. Quote, the majority said that they believe the president has done lasting damage to the independence of the Fed, and over 60% said that they felt his recent actions of politicization are to blame. Quote, if you look at all the things that the president and this administration are doing, said one banking CEO, all of them are in service of keeping the U.S. dollar as the world's reserve currency. The only thing that I have not been able to square with this administration is the attack on the Fed's independence. That is such a critical part of making sure the U.S. dollar remains the world's reserve currency, because people trust the Fed's independence is the one area that is outside the presidential influence. Well, apparently it is not. And that might be one of the reasons, by the way, that the dollar has actually slid in value since Trump took over. Yeah. But that's the thing, though. Authoritarians want complete control. For Donald Trump, I just think he wanted better loan terms on his debt. And that comes with lower interest rates. Trump's got a lot of debt. He had a lot of debt going into the election, a lot of loans. And so, yeah, that lower interest rate actually personally helps him. That's why he's really been pushing that. But again, authoritarians want control, even for selfish reasons. Okay. Now, one of the problems with lower rates, even though it can help stimulate the economy, but a side effect is higher inflation, which is already really bad. And it's getting worse, that inflation is. That said, these leaders took the time to gush about capitalism. Oh my God, capitalism. The greatest thing ever. They criticized Trump for doing things what they considered to be socialist or communist, right? Now, they cite the revenue sharing agreement with NVIDIA and AMD and their China-sourced revenues, as well as the Nippon Steel takeover of U.S. Steel. That's not necessarily socialism. What socialism is the democratization of the workplace. It is workers owning the means of production. That doesn't mean government ownership, okay? And so, what Trump is doing kind of sounds a bit like the beginnings of a merging of corporation and state, okay? Which, again, it's kind of what we call fascism. Look, Mussolini had described fascism as, quote, everything in the state, nothing against the state, nothing outside the state. Italian fascism, promoted by Mussolini, basically was a corporatist economic system whereby employer and employee syndicates would be linked together in associations to collectively represent the nation's economic producers and work alongside the state to set national economic policy. Mussolini, one of his ideas was to divide the country into 22 separate corporations, which would send representatives to parliament from each of these different industries. You know what that is? You know what that sounds like to me? It sounds like aspects of the Dark Enlightenment promoted by people like Curtis Yarvin and Peter Thiel. So remember, one of the goals of the Dark Enlightenment is to get rid of democracy. It's incompatible with what we're doing here, okay? And to appoint a CEO to run the country as president, right? And to split the country into districts run by corporations that would compete with each other for citizenry. That's it. So the comparisons to this administration with Nazi Germany don't quite as fit as well as the comparisons to fascist Italy do. All right. And again, they're borrowing from different authoritarian ideologies here and movements. Like they're taking some ideas from some people or groups and then ignoring others and whatever. They got a lot of things to borrow from. Okay. Like, for example, they don't like the wages being set by the government. Okay. I mean, look, Trump has argued against the minimum wage existing. Okay. And that's really it. And not only that, but they're trying to restrict the rights of labor. They're going after public sector labor unions, shutting down their ability for federal workers to strike. And from then on, probably going after private sector unions. So, I mean, dark enlightenment, that's really following that entire playbook, which again, Peter Thiel, Mark Andreessen, huge Trump backers. Okay. Now, that said, at the end of the day, getting back to this forum of CEOs, the writers of this article come to conclude that already the business community has a, quote, clear desire to return to a respect for the balance of powers in government, to reinforce international allies, like, for example, Ukraine, a respect for the balance, to fortify independent objective expertise of economists, and scientists, to encourage freedom of voice, whatever that means, to stop bullying countries, cities, and companies into resentful, uneconomical compromises. Here's the thing, though. We ain't going back to that. No, we're already too far along this unfortunate road to really go back to what they would consider to be normal. Okay? And look, we warned you that this was going to happen. We warned you about Project 2025, about the dark enlightenment. We told you that this is what they planned on doing. We knew from Trump's first term that he would do stuff like this. Now, he had tried to do a lot of this stuff during his first term, but he was stopped by the adults in the room. There ain't no more adults in the room now. No, there's no one left to stop him. He is completely unrestrained, even by the Supreme Court. And you know what, the Supreme Court, especially the Supreme Court, because they're the ones that are enabling him, giving him immunity. Republicans, they haven't restrained him. They're not even trying. They're going along with him. And as much as this community is complaining in secret, publicly, they're still 100% with him and his movement. And that's because the business community will always support the far right. Why? Because of tax cuts and deregulation, of course. This is what they get in return for their silence and subservience. I do not believe that these companies, despite their many complaints, will do anything to support or to oppose Donald Trump. They will continue to support and fund pro-Trump Republican candidates and oppose progressive Democrats while keeping their mouths shut. Okay? And support, by the way, the business takeover of the Democratic Party. And I could say a lot about the Democratic Party's, I should say, cowardice in opposing Donald Trump, but I won't get too far into that. Okay? All this is to say, though, that while the business community knows things are bad and will likely get worse, none of them will have the courage to stand up against the Mad King. Okay. And there you are. It's almost like some leftists like Mark Cuban care about more about money than what's right and wrong. I mean, who would consider Mark Cuban to be a leftist? I mean, look, if you're a leftist, that kind of means that you're an anti-capitalist, which I am. And so, it's the whole idea of the Democratic Party being anywhere near being leftist is ridiculous. No, they're center, maybe center right at best. When you look at the rest of the developed world and where their politics are, that's where the Democratic Party is. And of course, the right wing, the fascists, they're way, way, way off the cliff. Okay. But anyway, let's move on. We got the last story here. Talk about the Cuban was literally called left's billionaire. There's a few billionaires that are, in the Democratic Party, support the Democratic Party. But leftism, no. There are really no billionaires in leftism as a leftist. So, because leftists are anti-capitalist. All right, anyway. Here we go, Ilhan Omar. Representative Ilhan Omar recently hit back against President Donald Trump's attacks against her, saying that statements by Trump and Representative Nancy Mace show that the country is, quote unquote, led by idiots. So now Trump talked about her on Thursday to reporters aboard Air Force One. This was after a resolution to censure her over statements that she had made, generally true statements she has made about Charlie Kirk had failed. Take a look.
I love these people that come from a place with nothing, no anything, and then they tell us how to run our country. Now, I think if she got censored, that's great. If she got impeached, that's even better. They impeached me twice for nothing, and they impeached me knowing the Republicans are on my side.
What he just described with, I love the people that come from a place with nothing, no anything. That's the American dream, literally. I mean, Ilhan Omar came from a refugee camp and then became a congresswoman and a naturalized American citizen. That's an amazing story. But instead of it being aspirational here, Trump literally derides it because he does not believe in the American dream. Okay? I'm just saying. Now, Omar responded on Saturday to that statement by saying this.
He seems to have a real obsession with anyone that is an immigrant in this country that is not of European descent. You don't hear him talking about the accent of his wife and, the fact that she came here as an immigrant or any of those things, or the fact that she gets to have an opinion even though nobody elected her into office. But he has an objection to a person who does serve over 700,000 constituents in Congress, who's literally elected, has the same certificate as he does. But I think for me is I feel embarrassed for him because in these attacks, what he does, and I think with the likes of Nancy Mace and whoever that Randy guy is, they expose themselves for how stupid they are. He's uneducated enough to understand that members of Congress can't be impeached. When you have Nancy and Randy saying, we're on it, we're going to impeach her, when they're saying they're going to deport me, knowing full well that you cannot deport an American citizen, what that displays for not just Americans, but folks on an international platform is that our country is being led by idiots. And that is not something that we should be comfortable with as Americans, and that's not something that should make us proud.
And there you go, Ilhan Omar bringing facts, okay? Now, here's the thing. Facts do not matter to Trump and his supporters. They're a fact-free movement. What they cannot ignore, they just make up. I mean, they're eating the cats, they're eating the dogs. Ooh, no, nobody's doing that. Look, they're an anti-intellectual movement. And they do this on purpose, by the way. They don't like facts. What they want is people to be angry, okay? Because people who are angry, or people who are scared, they have a harder time using logic and reason, okay? It, shuts down that part of the brain. And so, look, a movement like MAGA, understand that they need fear and anger to continue, to keep going. And, by the way, they also always will need a new target. Once they're done with immigrants and trans people, they're going to come after gay people, they're going to come after other people, they're already coming after the left, and so that's what they're doing. Okay. And they use, again, fear of immigrants. They've used the fear of the browning of America. They use the anger over changing demographics. And then they're like, wouldn't it be great if we returned to a time that never actually really existed? That's what MAGA actually stands for. That make America great again. Right? Let's go back to the time where things were great, but mainly for white people. But wait, what was it about that time that did make America great? Oh, right, the growing middle class, higher taxes on rich people, strong labor rights and protections, that kind of thing. Yeah, that was pretty great. Again, mainly for white people. Let's be honest, because there was a lot of racism still back then, and a lot of bigotry and a lot of keeping, black people and people of color out of positions of power. And that's really what they're focused on. That's what MAGA really is interested in bringing back and has brought back for the most part, just the racism and bigotry, and ignored all the socioeconomic stuff that actually did make a large middle class. Okay. And so they're using fear and racism to turn Americans, white Americans, against anyone who is different, and while allowing giant corporations and the wealthy to pick our pockets. They may be idiots, but they sure do know how to manipulate people in order to, vote against their own best interests. And so they're pretty good at doing that. And they have effectively weaponized misinformation, disinformation, social media, lies, and bullshit in order to enact their goals, which are not going very well, will not go well for the vast majority of working people who did vote for President Donald Trump. I'm not saying the majority of the working class did. I'm just saying the people who did, who voted for Trump, that happen to be working class, you are not going to be helped out by this administration. In fact, this administration is out to hurt you, along with everyone else who's not a straight, white, very rich Republican male. That's the reality. Okay. Pendulous Dragon with a very kind super chat says, fear and anger makes you incapable of learning. Yeah, and really it hurts the brain. It makes it so that you do not think clearly and do not make good rational decisions. And that, unfortunately, is the state of our country right now, where you have so many people in positions of power who are incapable because they're so filled with frothing rage that they cannot make actual decisions. All you have to do to get people to vote against their own interests is to give people a scapegoat. That is 100% true. And that's exactly what they did with immigrants. And what the anti-immigrant movement over the past over 10 years. Okay, because I remember them talking about caravans. Immigrant caravans are coming over the border filled with the people from the global south to come take your jobs. Remember that back in 2014, 2015, with them talking about it. And then, of course, there's divide and conquer, all that stuff. And yeah, that's the tools that they're using. And as we've seen, they're incredibly effective. Okay. So there you are. That's the show today. If you haven't already, please like and share the stream. We're moving to Canada by the 30th. Good luck with your move, and I don't blame you at all. Transgender people, people who are non-binary, etc. A lot of them are leaving to another place because they cannot be guaranteed safety in this country anymore, and that is incredibly sad and fucked up. So there's my F-bomb for today. All right. Thank you all for joining, for watching. Again, please like and share. Consider becoming a supporter Go to our Patreon, patreon.com/jeffwaldorf, or hitting the join button below. If you're on YouTube, become a channel member, become a subscriber on Facebook or Twitch. There's plenty of different ways that we can, that you can support independent progressive media. Because obviously we are in, I think, the collapse of the old order, the U.S.-led order. And it would be nice to have, some funding to be able to chronicle this important point in history. There you go. All right, everybody. Thank you. And we'll see you guys, hopefully, and gals, and everyone in between tomorrow. Same time, same place. Love you all. And remember, change begins with you.